Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about interviews. So get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how do developers over 30 or 40 balance work and family responsibilities that have to balance work and family responsibilities find time to prepare for FANG style interviews? Do these interviews inherently favor younger developers who often have fewer obligations and more flexible schedules? No, I wouldn't say so. Well, it depends on how you look at it, of course, but I mean that would be this like it would be the same basically as with the other style of interviews, because if you need the time to prepare for, let's say for the sake of argument, you're going to get a job at a company who uses a slightly different framework, or like that code test uses something that you're not familiar with, same problem basically. If you don't have the time to prepare and you need to prepare, then of course if you don't have as many obligations or you have more free time, yeah, then that's gonna make things easier on you, right? But I mean, I find it very, very hard to believe that the like this is not by design, guys, because the thing about preparing for an interview like this or so forth is that, well, it's not really something that people consider that, well, you have to may or may not have to do it, but that has more to do with you rather, I argue, than that this test is poorly made or something like that. Because guys, like full disclosure, I don't think I've ever prepared for an interview ever. I just took it, done. And the people who really, really, really want to get into like the FANG companies and so forth, like there are entire books on how to prepare and stuff like that. And I sort of just go, what you're literally doing, in my opinion at the very least, is that you're approaching this as a student in a school, like in the good old days when you, well, maybe you're still in school, right? Where you studied for a test, and that's what you're doing. And I argue that the reason why quite a lot of, well, at least I did when I was a student, when I studied for a math test or so forth and so forth, that was because I didn't really care. I didn't care enough to learn the things during class and stuff like that. I studied for the test because I'm preparing to take the test. But if I actually really knew my stuff and so forth, and I actually did have the knowledge necessary, I would not necessarily have to study as hard, because then I would just take it. If you gave me a coding test again, let's just take non-FANG style into question today, guys. If you give me a test, like a coding test, which is on something that I've sort of been doing for quite a few years, then I will usually just be able to do it. I don't have to prepare or anything like it. It doesn't matter if I have 100 kids, because I can just do it. And the same would be true if I really knew my data structures, my algorithms, and things like that. Like, because even like what I truly find odd about people who prepare for FANG style interviews is that you have no way to tell what's going to be on the test. You can't prepare for it like you did in school. So what are you practicing for? Well, I'm guessing that you're practicing your recursive algorithms and your graph traversals and your divide and conquers and your sliding window algorithms and stuff like that. Like, and you can absolutely do that, but like fundamentally, if you have taken the time to learn these things during your education period, then that shouldn't matter all that much. And then as for whether or not, I mean, guys, there are single parents who manages to get them through school to, you know, like I just read this the other or I saw that the other day. It was a beautiful moment where a woman, I think from the States, they filmed the reaction that she had when figured at, like, she has 3 kids. She's a single mom with 3 kids, and she took the bar, which, as far as I know, is like in order to become a lawyer in the States, right? And she passed. Now, I'm assuming she's probably got a lot of help and so forth. I mean, guys, I have friends who have family and so forth and so forth, and usually, if you have obligations and so forth, you may not have as much time. But I went to school with people who had kids, and they put themselves through schools and so forth. So it's not like you can't shuffle around your. Usually, at the very least, in many cases, you can like approach this as a family. On your family circumstances may differ, of course. So I'm not going to be the guy who tells you how to live your life. I'm just saying that usually, if someone in your family, like say you do that for your kids, as an example, if they have an activity or something like that, well, then if you need to get them somewhere, you need to drive them or so forth and so forth. Usually, you as a family discuss, okay, so how can we make the schedule fit so that you can go to practice, and then your sisters or brothers or like what, if it's you have more than one kid, like so it doesn't collide in some way. And that's usually, and I argue at the very least, that's basic teamwork, basic family stuff. And again, if you don't have the time to study or so forth and so forth, then, well, yeah, there is very, very little you can do about it. Because, as I've always said before, guys, I've never find that not having enough time is the true reason why someone is unable to do something. Because it's the same thing I hear all the time from people who tell me that, oh no, I'm too busy to go and like exercise and stuff like that. And I asked them, are you telling me that you are so solidly booked that if I asked you right now, do you have, say, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, doesn't matter what it is, and you can't spare that on anything else? None whatsoever. Well, okay. How is it that you have your the time to run, check Facebook and read newspapers or like do whatever? Like I understand that it may feel that way, but when you get really down to it, I argue, it's usually a question of priorities. There are absolutely circumstances where that is not true, but I've seen enough examples of people who have a lot less time than the average person who has a family or so forth, and they somehow manages to make it work. And I always ask this question when I have it's the same thing I do at work. I ask people, if we put expectations on people and they can't meet them, then I argue that there's usually only two things that can be true here. One or two things are true. Either the expectations are unreasonable and they can't be done by anybody, or they can't be done by that specific person, and that person is not the right individual or doesn't have the circumstances necessary to meet those expectations. And it's the same thing with you. So if you ask yourself, are you telling me that you're not able whatsoever to prepare for FANG style interviews or things like that, like because you have family and so forth and so forth? And if that is the case, that's because nobody could with your family circumstances. Well, then yeah, then you're screwed. Then you're not going to be able to do this. But if you then find that, well, actually there are people who may be a lot more occupied than me who managed to do it, then maybe you need to rethink you may need to reevaluate whether it's really a question of that you don't have the time, or if it's a question of that you don't see a way to shuffle things around so that you actually find that time. So what I want you to take away from this, I would say that the way that people who have obligations is no different from it doesn't matter if you have a family, guys. You could be doing a million different things. If you don't have time, then you need to find that time. It's very, very simple. And I also argue to people that if it is the question, I mean, if you had the time to learn how to code, well, then I suggest to you that you approach it the same way. Because unless you did learn how to code before you got a family and now you're sort of screwed, right? Well, then I really, really hope for your sakes that that your work is really going to teach you everything that you need to know about software development, and you're never going to have to be in that situation where you get outdated or something like that, because this is a moving field. But for me, like at least all the friends and family I have, and like every person I've ever talked to, when they make the claim that I don't have the time, it is usually not a question of that they don't have the time. It is that they prioritize other things, and that's something that only you can deal with. Like that's down to it. The people who usually make it work, and that's the best example I can give to you, is that if a single parent or so forth and so forth can find the time to put themselves through school or things like that, even though that they might have a lot less time and be much under a lot more pressure than the average family structure, I think that it is feasible for you to do the thing that I'm suggesting to you, and that is to align with the people around you. Try to figure out in your life, are there things you can offload? Are there like places and like things that you can shuffle around in order to get the time that you need? And in many cases, you will find that if you can find the time to get your kids to school and practices and like all of this sort of stuff, well, why wouldn't that be possible for you? As a parent, I would suggest at the very least, and that's just what I think, you should try to sort of think, like, because I find that a lot of emphasis it gets put on the kids and like what they need and like so forth and so forth. But as a parent, you're part of the family structure, and if you need time to study or go to school or stuff like that, I argue there's very little difference between that and your kids wanting to go to football practice or ballet or whatever they're doing, right? It's the same deal. You have to, as a family, approach this and find the time as a family. That's what my suggestion would be. Have a great day.